Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Ghoulish with me, Max Booth, a host. This is a podcast where I, Max Booth, a host, talk to many different folks in the whole genre about various different spooky topics for about 20 minutes to an hour and a half. Usually on the short old side of things because, hey, I can only talk so long before I'm just like, okay, let's go do something else. So that's the type of professionalism you could expect from podcasts like Ghoulish with me, Max Booth, a host. Today on the program, I'm talking to Alma Katsu, author of the upcoming Red Widow. You probably recognize Alma from the last two really, really good books, The Hunger and The Deep. So those last two books were historical novels, but Red Widow is a spy thriller. So today on the program, we will obviously talking about spies. Now, does the topic of spy necessarily equal spookiness? Well, depends what you find spooky. Maybe you find spies spooky. Maybe you find the government spooky. You should. You absolutely should. In this episode, we're talking at length about Red Widow. We're talking about Alma's past experience working with the CIA. She is testing me and whether or not I have what it takes to be a spy. Yeah, that's right. She gives me the 10-second spy test. Do I pass? Do I fail? You can probably guess, but you should also listen to the episode to find out. Does she tell me secret classified information that would land her in jail if she told anyone? Maybe she does. That would be pretty fucking crazy if she did, but maybe she does. You won't know until you listen to the episode, right? Do I have a new job as a secret government agent? Am I leaving podcasting behind forever after this episode to go to some other country and I don't know, fight somebody in an empty field? I might. Again, all these answers. No, all these questions will be answered in tonight's episode. What else is going on? Yes, if put a little pin in this episode topic to do a little promotion for those just now tuning into the podcast. If you haven't listened to previous episodes and know nothing about me, my name is Max Booth. Hello, I'm a host. I also run a publishing company called Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, and today we just announced a new book coming out next month, actually, called Jurassic Christ by Michael Allen Rose. Now, this is a book about about Jesus Christ fighting dinosaurs with machine guns. So if that sounds like something you might be into, click the link in the show notes and go pre-order that baby. It's at perpetualpublishing.com. Perpetualpublishing.com. Only place you can pre-order a copy at this moment. Later on, it will be on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all of that. But right now, we just have the pre-orders on perpetualpublishing.com. And the first 100 paperback pre-orders of this book will receive a signed signature plate from Michael Allen Rose. So yeah, pretty exciting. Nothing to do with spies, unless you consider Jesus Christ a spy. And Maybe he is. Maybe there's some dinosaur spies in this book. I don't know. Well, I mean, I do know because I read it many times because I edited the book, so I know if some dinosaurs will spies, and the answer can only be found inside the book. So go pre-order that book, Jurassic Christ, by Michael Allen Rose. What else is going on? Not much. My movie, We Need to Do Something, which I wrote and produced, it is finally wrapping up post production and we're in the process of trying to find some distribution. So far, it's looking pretty promising. I'm hopeful that we will find someone pretty soon. We only just recently sent it out to several companies for consideration. So at the moment, I am living in the most impatient week of my life. I keep checking my phone, waiting for that magical text message from the director to show up saying we fucking sold it, Max. We sold the movie, and now you can buy a castle. I assume that's what happens when you sell a movie. You go and you buy a castle with a moat. You get some, I don't know, alligators inside the what do you call the liquid that's inside the moat? Is the moat itself what it's called? Is that the whole thing? Yeah, so you get some alligators in the moat to prevent trespassing. So that's, I don't know if there's anything like that around where I live in San Antonio, so I'm going to have to, I don't know, go on Craigslist? Is that how you buy a castle? Craigslist? I don't know. Anyway, I'm talking to Alma Katsu about Spies to promote her new book, Red Widow. It comes out this month. It comes out on March 23rd. Paperback, held back, maybe just held back actually. This is a big press, so what they usually do is they do the held back and the ebook and the audiobook, and then like several months later they come out with the paperback. So I imagine that's what's going on here. I haven't read the book yet, but I'm really excited about it. I have it pre-ordered through bookshop.com, which is a pretty great place to buy books instead of Amazon. Highly recommend bookshop.org. I think I may have just said .com a few seconds ago. It's not .com, it's bookshop.org. O-L-G. That's for those not in the business, that is short for organization, maybe. I don't know. I'm just guessing. I honestly, it could be anything. Organism, maybe? That wouldn't make a lot of sense. I'm guessing the organization. Yeah, that sounds right. So yeah, go to bookshop.organization and pick up Alma Katsu's Red Widow and listen to my episode with her where we talk about Spies. Exciting, right? Yeah. This is the longest intro I've done for Ghoulish. Is this something you like, or do you prefer I just get on to the episode? Because I could fucking ramble like this on all future podcasts if that's what you want. I don't mind. I have no one else to talk to. I'm alone. My significant other is in some middle room of the house. She won't talk to me right now because she's doing something called taxes. I'm not exactly positive what that means, but I think she made it up to get away from me. So just me on this microphone recording an intro to an episode of Ghoulish with me, Max Booth. And I think perhaps I should get on to the interview before you shut this off. So once again, Alma Katsu's Red Widow, available soon. Go pick it up. Now let's listen to my conversation with Alma about Spies. Let me ask you something. Do they use Skype in the CIA?
No.
Do they have like a secret CIA Skype?
They have had what we call secure video teleconferencing, or SVTCs, for 20 years.
Okay, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
they haven't worked great, but they've had them. Yeah.
And does it operate pretty good? Well, no.
I'm sure it's much better now. When it first started out, we might as well have been, wearing colanders and tinfoil hat. I mean, it was just so it didn't work more than it worked.
I understand. So this is what, the second book now you've launched during COVID times?
Yes, the first one was just about a year ago. It might be exactly a year ago, was The Deep. And literally, you do this little call with your publicity team before you go on the road. And, um, they were giving me the rundown. And at the end of it, I said, hey, has anybody been talking about this COVID thing? Like, should we be thinking about it? And there was this uncomfortable silence. And they were like, nobody's said anything. Like, I'm sure they were afraid I was going to like upset the apple cart because it was too late to turn anything. Right. So I go on the road and literally 2 days later, I'm coming home. It's not their fault. I mean, nobody knew. In my other life, I'm a social media researcher, and I actually did a study on the early days of COVID and what the public discourse was around it. And so nobody in the United States really was talking about it. By nobody, I mean it's very small numbers compared to what we think of today, of course. So I'm not blaming them by any stretch, but it just came out of left field. And so we had all this media lined up and nothing, crickets. Nobody had wanted to talk about anything that wasn't COVID. So that was pretty sad. A lot of work went into that book, and I know a lot of people have lost so much more to COVID than that, right? So I'm not, in the scale of things, it's a small thing, but it was just a disappointment. Let's just put it that way. But who would have thought a year later we'd still be quarantined, stores wouldn't be able to open, or it would be so uneven and weird. And here's another book that I have very high hopes for, because it's a book I never thought I'd actually ever get published. And yeah, so I can talk about that if you'd like.
Why did you think it would never get published?
Well, it's hard to even get published in one genre in this business. And then once you kind of get known for that genre, it's really hard to leave it. And I don't think folks appreciate that. A lot of writers, I think, would write in multiple genres if they could. But the hard part about the book business is selling books. And it's just set up to sell a certain way. And so once people get to know your name, I mean, if you're Stephen King, of course, you could write anything. He could sell his grocery list. But for most people, they kind of get to know you for a particular kind of book. And the community gets to know you, booksellers, other book publishers, the media. And so when you try to switch over, I think there's a lot of skepticism. So it's a very hard thing to do. And we were on our way. The Hunger did very well, broke out very well. I think it was helped a lot by the Ridley Scott deal, before we even had a book deal. Ridley Scott had optioned the rights to it, and that helped a lot. But one day I was meeting with my editor. She just happened to be in DC for some promotional thing, and we got together, and the show The Americans was going into its final season. And she was telling me how sad she was because she loved the show. And then she looked at me, and I kind of figured there was a little message there. And she said, what I'd really like is if someone could write a spy book that had this sort of domestic component to it too,
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at her and I said, I can do that. And I'll give you a proposal in a week. So I did. And we spent like a year tweaking what the book would actually be about, back and forth, back and forth. And the stakes for the book just got higher and higher and higher until it was frightening. But that's what it takes to write a thriller these days, is that they really have to be just insane in some, the expectations for twists and all that kind of stuff. So once it got to that point, then she was like, yeah, okay. and so, and so I started writing a spy novel. I just never thought, but people would think with my background, that's what I would have done in the first place. And I kind of tried it, but it just wasn't natural to me.
So, for those listening who do not know about your background, can you elaborate?
Sure. So in real life, almost my entire adult life has been spent in the intelligence business. I started out at NSA as an analyst, way back when dirt was being formed, and stayed there a long time. But then after 9/11, I ended up going to work in policy for a little while, and CIA approached me and said, "Would you like to come? My area of specialty." And so I went and worked at CIA for about a third of my career. And this is where it gets weird. And then my first book was coming out, and they didn't. I just kind of felt like, even though it had nothing to do with intelligence, it was like fantasy, romance, paranormal, Twilight, but much darker. And they were like hassling me about
Oh no.
meeting with the media and stuff. And I'm like, and there's a reason, and we can go into that. But so I, like many foolish authors, when you sign your first book deal, you think, this is it. I'm going to be rolling in money. So I quit, and I just wrote for a year, and I was terrified. So I was talking to somebody I knew at Rand, the Rand Corporation, and they said, we would love to have you. So I ended up working at Rand for a few years and really enjoyed that, and then had the opportunity to go back to the government. And so I finished out my career at NSA and retired a couple years ago. And I'm still a consultant. I consult back to government and business on emerging technologies. But most of my time is writing, and actually, I think I'm going to start phasing out the consulting work.
How challenging was it? I mean, your Phil Skeptical books, they weren't really in the hill genre. It's like the deep, right? They were a little
Yeah.
fantasy. So I guess you've already had plenty of experience leaping around genres. So maybe going to a spy thriller wasn't as held as I'm imagining. I don't know. Walk me through that.
It wasn't for me, and that's because I worked in it for 35 years.
Yeah.
So it was so much second nature. And then the writer in me would have to, like, for every, plot point or something, say, is this twisty enough, or is this enough? Because that's the big difference. Intelligence, it is a amazing field, and you get insights into things that you wouldn't normally see, of course, but it's very different than what most people think of, if all they know is, movies and television. It's not so much about the big grand gesture, where the lone hero swoops in and, like, grabs the bomb and throws it across the room and beats up the bad guy. It's really, you won't get to that point if you're successful. It's all about nudging and tweaking
So
and the back end.
you've never thrown anyone across the room and beat them up?
Just the people who've worked for me.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah, no one would say that I was an easy person to work for, but I've gotten better over time. But anyway, so yeah, that's the main thing. Like, the real life of intelligence, I think, is very interesting, and and would fascinate most people. But I do think that modern readers and modern viewers have been conditioned to expect something different. And so you can't really write a story that's completely true to life and still have it be compelling and engaging enough for most people, I think. So that's the where the writing challenge comes in. But otherwise, it's pretty quick. The historical horror novels take me not a super amount of time. I'd say about 6 months to get to finish it. And then, of course, as for a year, you have copy edits going back and forth as they line everything else up. But the spy novel, I think I can probably do one in 4 months if I had to.
Is this something you feel like you want to keep doing, the spy novels? Like, did you have fun writing this?
I did. And the main reason is, one of the things that's always bothered me a little bit, if you ask a lot of professionals, and I still work with some guys, some real old codgers, and I should be careful because now I'm one of them. I just realized we're all in the same office together. And I often thought of it as like an office of old codgers, but now I'm there. Um, so anyway, if you talk to people in intelligence, most of them, especially the old ones, they're like, they really look down on it because it's so unrealistic. And uh, so I'm sorry, I sort of lost my train of thought
Oh,
there
it's
because
okay.
that's so strong in my mind, that,
Yeah.
oh, these stupid books are so unrealistic. And I always kind of worried about writing them, because I know now as a writer that you kind of have to go into that territory in order to capture readers. But when you've been in the field, you feel a little like, you don't want to make a fool of yourself either.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, kind of walking that balance too. But part of it is so many of them are so male oriented. There's some that I would even classify as male fantasy fulfillment. It's like stories that men wish their
Right.
lives were like this, right?
Right.
And it's just, some of it is so insulting to women. So I always thought it would be interesting to see if I could write a story from a female character perspective that would still be compelling enough to male readers, but would be something that women in the field like me could recognize themselves in. And I think the book does that, but again, whether or not male readers will read the book, I don't know.
Well, I'm definitely going to read it when it arrives. I am stoked to read it. For those
Oh, thank you.
listening, I mean, I was a huge fan of the Americans. I can't say I've read much spy fiction, but I wasn't really a fan of the genre until the Americans came along, and now I'm like, well, shit, I would love to read a book too. Let's do that.
So you should read Joe's first book. Joe Weisberg, who was the showrunner for the Americans, went through the training program at CIA, and he left after that. And then he wrote two books. He was a school teacher, and he actually wrote a book about teaching school, and I didn't read that novel. But when his spy novel came out after that, An Ordinary Spy, it got a lot of press because, whenever you have a security clearance, you have to submit things that have to do with the work you did for pre-publication review. And so when he sent it into pre-pub review, they ended up redacting a lot of it. And apparently, uh, he and the publisher were so pissed, they published the book with the redactions in it, and it got a lot of press. And I read that book, and I happened to be in the recruiting office at that time. And I wrote to Joe and I said, this is the best book that really shows what it's like when you first start off as a case officer. And it took some fighting, but I understand that book is now on CIA's recommended reading list. They didn't want to put it on at first, but they've softened over time.
The place they sent the book to read originally, was it like one of those offices you see in the beginning of 3 Days of the Condor with Robert Redford, and he's like just reading all this stuff for the CIA? You know what I'm talking
I don't.
about?
Yeah, I do. I haven't seen that movie in so long. I saw it when it came out. That's how long ago it was. I even have a story about it.
Tell
So,
me.
that is so old that, well, I grew up in a town called Maynard, Massachusetts. And Maynard at the time was famous for being the home of Digital Electronics Corporation, or DEC. And they were the first company that made mainframe computers. So old that many of your listeners will have to go look that up on Wikipedia. Um, and Digital supplied the computers for the filming of 3 Days of the Condor, or
Okay.
6 days. I forget, because the title of the book is different than the
Yeah,
movie.
the book is 6 and the movie is
Okay.
3. I guess they didn't have the budget for 6 days.
So when they did the premiere in Maynard, I guess to sort of pay back Digital for the computers, it said 3 Days of the Condor starring the Digital PDP-8 mainframe. So that's my introduction to the movie. But you mean the pre-publication review office? I know what
Yeah.
it's like because I used to go down and visit them occasionally. Because my whole last 10 years of my career, I was constantly sending the manuscripts, because when you work there, they kind of have a different lever over you than when you're a retired person. So they pretty much can strong arm you into showing them everything, whether or not there's an intelligence component to it or not. But I also was writing spy novels that I was trying to send out. And so we cross paths a lot. No, it's just a handful of nice people who um, are a little burnt out on their regular jobs, so they do a tour in the pre-pub office, volunteering to read. And the vast majority of what they read is not fiction or screenplays. The vast majority are like somebody's paper for their master's program that they're writing on intelligence, or that kind of thing, or maybe an op-ed somebody's trying to get published in the newspaper.
That kills my dream of like that was my
Sorry.
dream job. What, you just sit in an office and read books all day? I could do that. But I'm not
You
gonna.
should become a historian for CIA then, because that is exactly what they do. I work with those guys. They're really nice and very astute. I was hoping to actually go into business doing a history podcast with one of them, but he got cold feet at the last minute.
Ah, dang.
Yeah, it's
You,
tough when you're facing retirement, to make the plunge.
I I used to be a big podcast listener, but I fell a bit behind in the last like 6 months or so. But you do have one, right? Well, did you? Is it on a break right now?
Well, I didn't do a podcast like most people, like a regular weekly or something like that. I did podcasts to talk about the history behind the historical horror novels. Because what I found was, for instance, when I did the Hunger tour for the hardcover when it came out, people were really fascinated with the history part and what was different between my novel and what actually happened. And then when I did the tour for the paperback, they were even more interested. And I thought, it's really a shame because you only get to go to a few cities, and not that many people go to book events. Maybe that'll change after COVID because we'll all be starving to see people's faces.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. But so it was a handful of people were hearing this stuff, and I'd done all this, preparation. So I thought, why not do a podcast? So I did 4 or 5 episodes for the Hunger, and maybe 3 or 4 for the Deep. But it's the kind of thing that if you don't put a lot of work in it, it's really hard to build an audience. So yeah, I don't think I'll be doing it for the spy novels. I actually did some videos, short videos answering questions from readers, what they wanted to know about the spy business. I think the most popular one had to do with how do you get a job at CIA, because a lot of people are basing their belief is based off of what they read in like historical fiction books, where the ingenue is approached in World War II to be a spy because you have the right characteristics, that kind of thing.
I've always wanted to be a spy, and in my head, I kind of know how anyone would become a spy. So in
Ah,
my head, I think how it works is I have to be like in a public place, and then I have to see a major like crime happening, some bomb in progress, and I have to be brave and stop it. And then the next day, I'll get a knock on my door by a recruiter who will say, "Hey, you got nice chops, kid, but you can look for us." Is that accurate at all?
not so much. I mean, it would be nice, wouldn't it? Uh, So let me tell you a little bit because I did spend a year in recruiting,
Okay.
and generally those details, as they're called, are punishments for when you do something bad and you piss off your boss, which is how I ended up there. And but the joke was on them because it was actually one of the funnest jobs I had. And I had some pretty fun jobs. I actually got to run. I was the director of a research lab for the Defense Department. I mean, I've had some amazing jobs, but this one was pretty neat because not only did you learn a lot about the agency, parts of it that you, as an analyst, for instance, I didn't get exposed to, but I got to meet young people all over the country. It was mostly the Northeast I did, but and really, learn a lot about what young people go through these days to find a job. All of us old farts say that if we had to apply today, they never would have hired us. Sorry, kids. Um, Nowadays, they used to test for aptitude. That's how I got hired. Not, there weren't that many kids with computer degrees back then. Obviously, mainframes were just coming online. I mean, I probably had more computer experience because I had worked at digital than most people ever would, right? So nowadays, it's all specialized degrees and that stuff. But I can tell you a little bit about the recruitment process, and you'll be disappointed because it's not that far off from like what Google does and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll give you the test because one thing I noticed is, you know, first of all, the agency hires so many skills, so many different skills. I can't even begin to tell you. One of my last jobs at the agency, not at NSA, was in the shop that I like to call the real Mission Impossible, where they do the disguises and identities and stuff like that. And it is mind blowing. And that shop alone uses all kinds of skills that you cannot even begin to imagine. But for the most part, CIA hires two kinds for two positions. That one is what everybody thinks of when they think of CIA, and that's what's known as the clandestine service. And those are the people who go out and recruit spies. Now, the people who work at CIA are not spies. That's not what we call them. And I use that term now in the promotion for Red Widow, but that's not what we call them. What most people would think of as a spy is actually an asset. It's the person that the clandestine officer would find who has the secrets that the US government needs. And the case officer recruits the asset, recruits the spy. So that's what most people think of when they think of CIA, right? The man in the field who finds the foreigners, who has the information, who handles them and runs the operation and all that fun stuff. And then the other one is an analyst, which is what I was. And we're the people who brief the president, basically. You have to become the expert in the subject that you were hired for or you move into. And so you're the one who's amassing information, talking to the experts out in the field, and making the assessments and the judgments so that when it comes to a critical juncture, you can alert policymakers that some action needs to be taken, right? So those are the two basic jobs. One is sort of a combination of writer, reporter, historian, basic studious person. And the other one is the man in the field. So let me ask you, just based on that description, which of those positions do you think you would be better suited for?
I mean, I love standing in the field, so I love a good field.
Okay. But you're a writer. I'm surprised. I would have thought you had said that you would make a better analyst.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. What if? I mean, I write, and I also do other things as well. I mean, I can multitask. Maybe I do both.
So it's funny you say that. That comes up so often. And so I was the lead analytic recruiter for the Northeast. So that meant like, Yale, Harvard, Brown, all of the big whoop-de-doo schools, Princeton. And you'd be surprised how many guys would say that to me. Oh, I could do either. And the truth is very few people could do either. So now I'm going to give you the 10-second test. Real easy. You're invited to a party. Do you, when you go to the party, are you the kind of guy who goes into the room and wants to talk to everybody, just flits around from person to person and wants to get to know each person and, find out what makes them tick and, just fascinated? Or are you the guy who stands in the corner or maybe goes to the kitchen and talks to one person for most of the night, or maybe even wishes he wasn't there and wonders why he accepted the invitation and wants to be home? Which person are you, Max?
So I can just answer this based off of past experience of what I
Mm-hmm.
usually do, and neither of those qualifies for me. I'm the guy who is in the empty bedrooms, snooping through all the belongings and just filling my pockets.
You're
Yeah.
an actual thief. Wow.
Yeah, I'm a pickpocket. I'm a thief. I'm going through blueprints. I don't understand blueprints, but I look at them.
So, that's the first time I've ever gotten that answer. Few people would say I mean, we're not law enforcement, but we are
Right.
federal, would admit to being a thief. That's very interesting.
I mean, I've
Well, I'm
stolen.
retired,
Yeah,
so,
what are you gonna do?
right. Nothing, but your listeners, someone might be a law enforcement officer. Anyway, that's very interesting. So, you know what? You would not be a case officer or an analyst.
Ooh, something else.
Yeah, you might be recruited to actually be the asset. Because that's what assets do.
I mean, I think I could do that. I'm pretty good with keeping a secret. I wouldn't say my social security number on a podcast or anything.
Right.
That would be awful. I wouldn't say it's. That would be fucking crazy.
That would be
So
crazy.
I wouldn't do that. Yeah. I also wouldn't say my address. I
Don't say
mean,
your
yeah,
address.
I
Don't say your
definitely
address.
wouldn't.
Okay.
It's
No. So here's the thing, though. Assets are recruited for their access to things. So you would have to have access to something that our government or a foreign government. Now, the other thing is, people should really be aware. I know there's a lot of propaganda out there, but the intelligence community, the US intelligence community, is interested in foreign issues, right? Not domestic. There are very specific conditions under which the intelligence community gets involved in domestic issues, and they have to be invited in by the agency that has that mandate, which is for the most part the FBI.
okay.
So if what you have access to are American things, we would not recruit you as an asset. However, the Russians or somebody else might want to recruit you as an asset.
Well, that's okay
Just
with
saying.
me. How do I do that?
Well, you could parade up and down in front of the Russian embassy or consulate with like a sandwich board saying what it is you're offering. No,
Do they pay
yeah,
good?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Do they pay good? Or what's the pay
I don't
like?
know. I don't know. It would depend on what the secret is that you were trying to sell.
Oh, okay. Good to know. I don't know how to get secrets. Like, do I hack an email? What do I do?
Well, see, this is the thing. I do think to a certain degree, there's this perception that if you just have certain skills, that's enough. But really, I mean, yeah, because a lot of the books, are about the hired gun assassin that CIA hires or something like that. Not really. I mean, things have changed since 9/11, and there have been parts of intelligence work that have become very operational. I will say they're highly controlled too, though. It's not as wacky as they make you think on TV and that sort of thing. But by and large, the CIA isn't hiring, safe crackers or things like that. Because basically, if you have secrets that are kept, whether they're physical, so they're kept in a safe, or they're electronic, so they're kept, on a standalone computer somewhere, it's the person who already has access to them that you would want to recruit. So, most people who do that, who sell secrets, do it not for ideology, but for money. So if they're going to pay you, they just as soon pay somebody who already has access to those secrets.
Oh, that's
Sorry.
that's two dream jobs you've ruined on this podcast.
I'm so sorry. Well, you could go get a job somewhere where they have those secrets and then offer to sell them.
Yeah.
Don't do that to the U.S. intelligence community, though, because they're very strict about that kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Very strict.
I didn't.
Yes.
Interesting. Good to know.
Yeah.
So,
Very strict.
while writing this book, did you like come across some scenes or details where you thought, "Oh man, I don't know if I'm allowed to write about this."
I pretty much know where to censor myself for that kind of stuff. So the interesting thing about Red Widow is it's actually based on a true story, but it has changed so much that no one would ever recognize the case, which if I were to tell you what it was, you would know because it had been in the newspapers, but it has never been publicly associated with the agency. So,
Tell me.
no,
Damn.
I like you, Max, but I'm not going to jail for you.
I'm a bad spy. That's my only like method.
Tell
Tell
me?
me.
Yeah.
Then I give up immediately. All right.
Oh my gosh, so funny.
So before we end this, why don't you tell I know already, but tell the audience what Red Widow is about. Give us a breakdown of what to expect.
So, Red Widow is kind of a cat and mouse story. It has to do with two female agents at CIA. One, her name is Lindsay Duncan. She's fairly young. She's in her 30s. So she started her career. She's what we'd call a mid-careerist. And she was a rising star at the agency. But then she did something not super bad, the kind of thing that I'll just throw it out there. I don't want to piss off too many people, but the kind of thing that men don't really get in trouble for, but if
Hmm.
they want to get you in trouble, they will, right? And
Yeah.
women tend to get in trouble for it a little bit more. So she's afraid she's actually going to be fired, and she's waiting to hear this. She got recalled from overseas, and she's waiting to hear what the adjudication is when she gets asked to sit on a task force. Some Russian assets of CIA's, this is Russians that they've recruited, are getting rolled up in Russia, and they fear that this means there's a mole somewhere in CIA. Because one happens, two, three is definitely, that's not a coincidence. So she comes in because this is her area of expertise, and she knows both Russia division, which is the part of CIA at Langley that is in charge of Russian affairs. And also she had worked at Moscow Station, which is, the nest where the CIA people hang out and do their operations in the country. And if there's a mole, it's going to be in one of those two places. So while she's investigating, she becomes friends with another CIA analyst, Teresa Warner, who's known as the Red Widow, because her husband, who used to be a high level manager in Russia division, ended up being killed a few years earlier while he was on doing an operation in Moscow. And she decided she would stay there. So she's like this, everyday reminder of the tragedy that can befall you, in the service of your country. But she's kind of bitter and kind of mad. And so I don't want to give away too much, but it's the interaction between these two women, and they end up finding out that they're both being lied to and manipulated by somebody else.
Wow.
And yeah, and then they have to find out why.
And this is
There's a
based on a true story.
It's based on a true story. There is a really good twist in it, and I really wish there's actually two twists in it. I really wish I could bring it up because the twist makes Teresa Warner just just such a good character to have written. And as a writer, one of the big challenges I always have is trying to make the protagonist as interesting as, I
Yeah.
won't say that Teresa's an antagonist, but she's conflicted, let's say. And your protagonist has to be good and all this kind of stuff. Teresa, just when you come to the chapters that are her POV, she just grabs you by the throat. It was so much fun writing her.
It sounds like fun. I can't wait to check it out. And about the true story it's based on. Tell me.
No.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
How can folks
Sorry.
find you online?
So can I add one more thing?
Oh
I don't know
yeah.
if you know this or not, but the book was optioned by Fox, and we're in the process of developing the TV series.
Oh yes, I did see that.
Very exciting.
So, what can you tell me about that beyond what you just said? Anything, or is it still a secret?
Well, it's getting there. I mean, Sarah Condon is sort of the head honcho, the executive producer. And she, one time, was the head of drama for HBO. And she did a lot of series for HBO. And now she's on her own and has a production studio. So she's been brought in to head the project. And we're in the process of talking to showrunners. So very, very exciting. I've never done that before, but I get to sit in on it. I'm also an executive producer. I have no idea what that means. I've never done it.
Nobody knows
So
what it means.
nobody knows what it means. I'm really amazed to have this opportunity. I mean, I had a whole full career in intelligence, and it was a good career. I mean, I got to do some really interesting things that I never thought I'd be able to do. And then I became a writer, and now I'm going into television. I mean, it really is freaking amazing. I just can't believe I'm having this life.
I am so happy. I mean, this is awesome. I mean, you definitely deserve it.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Do you think this, like, the CIA is going to be listening to this podcast?
I have no idea. They're very busy. I have a friend who, as a matter of fact, I based a character on him in the book. We have known each other our entire careers. And he ended up being, well, I shouldn't describe him too much because otherwise I could get him in trouble. But he's fairly, I mean, he's like a talking head on TV shows and stuff. He's retired also. And I was talking to him because I was getting a little worried about the extent to which pre-publication review might mess up my life. And he said, I used to worry about it, but I don't anymore. And I just say what I want, and I he publishes op-eds in the major newspapers and stuff. He said, they have to find me. If they come to me and say, why didn't you bring this by us? He'll throw his hands up and say, yeah, you got me, mea culpa. But it still hasn't happened. They're too busy to find every little thing that people say. So
That's good. And plus,
I've gotten less worried.
If they did try that, you just do like what I usually do, and I just say, oh, maybe it went to spam. And then when they check the email, run away. I don't know.
I'll try that. Thank you. I hadn't thought about that. Maybe it's in your spam folder. I did send it.
It's the spam trick, I call it.
Yeah. So how you doing? I've been a fan of yours since I read your story that ended up in Miscreations. It was a fabulous story.
Oh, thank you.
And I understand you've been doing some screenwriting. You did something with Josh Malerman's production studio.
I did, yeah. I wrote a script based on my book, We Need to Do Something, and it was filmed last October. And as we're talking right now, we have sent the movie out to like 25 different companies saying, please buy it.
Well, I will just be waiting with, my fingers crossed and bated breath to hear of your glorious success.
Well, thank you. And I will be watching Red Widow on my TV.
Let's hope. You know what a long journey. Well, actually, it sounds like you guys did some magic so that it was sort of expedited. Yeah, I'm a little prepared for this to be a long journey, but we'll see.
Yeah, it seems like it's always a long time, but for some reason, in my case specifically, it happened like within 2 months of finishing the screenplay, and I could only assume it's because it was the only script laying around movie studios that took place in one room, and it was easy to film during COVID.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, I can't wait to see it. That sounds fascinating.
Thanks. How can folks find you online?
My website is Alma Katsu Books, ALMAKATSU books.com. And everything links from there. But I'm on Instagram and Twitter, under my name. So pretty easy to find.
Excellent. Now, before we go, can you tell me something that you will classify not to tell anyone?
No, I'm not going to tell you any classifieds. Is that what you just asked?
Yeah.
Nice try.
Like any
nice
government secrets? No, nothing?
No, sorry. Like I said, I like you, but I'm not going to jail
for
you.
Well, I tried. Alright, that was my episode with Alma Katsu. Go buy Red Widow, available extremely soon. Yeah, go pre-order it right now. Don't waste this opportunity. And also, go pre-order Jurassic Christ by Michael Allen Rose, coming out in April. Go to perpetualpublishing.com. Pick it up. Come support us on Patreon at patreon.com/PMM Publishing. And also, leave a review on iTunes. I want to get back to doing this podcast more often. Leave me good reviews that encourage me to continue this fucking thing I do sometimes. It's called Ghoulish, and it's hosted by me, Max Booth, a host. Fuck, I just spilled my coffee.
Live spooky, die spooky.